So we have Claudia in Sicily, Javier and Maria Elena, who is in Colorado. So welcome, you presenters, and you need to, I guess you need to unmute yourselves.
Yeah, I can unmute myself for now.
There we go. So I was lucky enough in 2018 to meet these wonderful people when I was in Italy for the Adventure Travel Trade Association's annual summit, which was that day. And before the summit begins, which is I think 3 days of intense meetings and just networking and amazing time. We had a pre-summit adventure where I spent 5 or 6 nights with Claudia and a dozen or more other travel industry adventurous folks from all over the world. And some of the pictures you'll see tonight are from that adventure in that part of Italy, but we're going to explore some other options, other places as well. So welcome.
Thank you, Nancy.
Thank you.
Nice to see all of you. I like all of the Italian last names that I see in some of these pictures.
That's exactly what I was looking at as well.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here to chat with you all. As Nancy said, we're going to chat a little bit about our hidden gems in Tuscany. Oh, sorry, I'm getting back to I need to get back to my slideshow here. Oh, what it's doing. I'll figure that out in a second. Oh, there we go. No, that's not what I want to do. So we have just a few information about us is the background on our company, and then we're kind of gonna dig into a lot of the things that actually Nancy did with us back in 2018. And then Claudia, who lives in Sicily, will be the specialist and give us a little bit of a rundown about Sicily. So if I can get to my first slide here and get back to it, let me see here if I can share my screen. As usual, technology is going to get in the way, of course, at some point. Oh, okay, there we go.
By the way, I'm connected from a kitchen in our small apartment where our girls are sleeping next door. So I hope the pot that's going here isn't making too much noise. My wife is cooking.
Because what time is it, Javier? Midnight?
It's midnight, yeah.
All right, I'm going to share my screen, and then I'm going to already share for the sound because we have a few videos at some point to play as well. Okay. Let me see here. I'm not entirely sure what you guys are seeing, but if it makes sense to you all.
I see the first slide.
Oh, that's a good start.
Hunters.
For some reason, you all disappeared on me, so.
Yeah.
I guess I can't see any of your smiling faces right now, so I'm just going to stare at my screen. I assume if you guys have any questions, maybe raise your hands while it's going, and then somebody can tell me, hey, someone's raising their hand, because for some reason I can't seem to see you all at all. I don't see.
Put it in the chat as well. Type it.
Yeah.
Questions in the chat.
That's great. Perfect. That's a good idea. So just as an introduction, my name is Maria Elena Price, and as Nancy said, Claudia is here with us as well as Javier. I am one of 2 owners of a company called Bikes Plus. That's the official name out of Italy. And then I also am owner of a company based in the United States, based in Colorado, called Experience Plus. My sister and I, the company's been around for a while. We're almost 50 years old. Reason this is not moving forward. we go. So a little history about myself and our company, just because it kind of dovetails into how and why we run trips the way we run and organize and help people explore the world. My parents are a product of international soft diplomacy, if you want to call that. My mother was a exchange student back in the 60s. As an Italian student, she ended up in the small town of Newport, Oregon, and she met my father as a young high school student. And they made it work somehow, even after she went back home. He pretty much ended up chasing her back to Europe at some point and ended up not leaving until they got married 3 years later somehow. So, well, no, he did leave for a little bit and they actually wrote letters for 2 years, but then he ended up back in Italy and they got married. And so, they realized early on that they had a lot of wanderlust in their world, and in the Greece and the Pisa labels are switched somehow. But in 1972, when they had landed back in the US, they were trying to find ways as broke college students to get back to Italy. And they had pedaled their bikes from Pisa, where my mother had done her college degree and finished it in 1969, to her hometown of Forlì, also across the Apennines and up into her hometown. And so they had this crazy idea that maybe they could sell that trip. And so they actually got 20 people to join them in 1972. And they were probably one of the first commercial bike touring operators to send folks over to Italy. And that kind of started a lifetime of adventure for them and academia. My mother is actually a professor. She retired after working for 30 years at Colorado State University, which is why we're actually in Colorado. But throughout our history, my sister and I grew up basically living on both sides of the ocean, spending our summers in Europe, scouting trips, and my parents became specialists in designing trips, mostly cycling for many years, but their original dream was actually to create a company called Italian Specialty Tours that would specialize in boutique small group travel that included, Renaissance specials and historical trips and things like that. And in 1984, my dad said he put I think 5 ads in the Atlantic, and they had, all kinds of different options for trips. And the only one that sold was the 1985 bicycle tour. And so that's one of the reasons they specifically concentrated on bike tours. But they had a dream of doing more varied trips than early on. And so since then, it became a relatively large company, I would say. We run trips in over 15 different countries. And in 2008, my sister and I decided at the height of the recession that as my parents were getting tired, that maybe we should try this out. We couldn't really imagine a world without it, to be honest. We'd grown up guiding trips and being on tour, and we loved sharing other countries. At that time, I had actually spent quite a bit of time in Spain. My sister had been in France, and I developed trips throughout South America. So it was kind of in our blood. And so since then, we took over the American brand, which is Experience Plus Bicycle Tours. Like I said, we're based out of Colorado. But at the same time, we had to have a European operator to legally operate in Italy and in Europe as a whole. And so my sister, as life would have it, ended up falling in love and marrying one of our guides. So she actually lives in Italy and I live over here. So our headquarters is in Faenza, that little red dot there. It's just north of Tuscany. You'll see it's in the province of Emilia-Romagna, right here. And we live about 50 miles from the border with Tuscany. So we're quite close to that. It's in fact many of our favorite places are just south of us. Although we're a little biased about Emilia-Romagna as well. We think it's kind of the other hidden gem. So maybe the next webinar can be about the hidden gems around our
yes.
home. Sicily is also special, not just because Claudia lives there, but also because it's a stunningly unknown place to travel. But that we are including Sicily here because I know that was on Nancy's list to prepare a trip. So we wanted to kind of spark the imagination for that. And the photo down in the corner is actually the headquarters, or the old headquarters of our office. It is an old pigsty that my mom's cousin used to raise pigs. And then back in 1998, we leased and bought it from them, and we converted it to a workshop, an apartment, and office space for us. And as a note, Javier lives in Faenza. Although he is also an expat, he is originally an Argentinian Texan. Javier, do you want to say anything else about your origins?
Yeah, I lived in that farm.
Yes.
That's how I got started here 12 years ago. I met Rick and Paula, Maria Elena's parents, in Patagonia in Argentina. Briefly, I have an Italian last name because my Italian great-grandparents emigrated to Argentina. That's where I was born, and that's why I have a Spanish name. But I grew up in an oil family. So when I was 11 years old, my dad moved us to Houston, Texas. My work and my wanderlust has taken me around the world also. I've lived in Mexico, Brazil, Venezuela, Norway. And for 2 years now, 2.5 years, I've been working for Maria Elena and her sister Monica out of the Faenza office. I have 3 daughters. My wife is also Argentinian Italian like I. So that's my story.
Excellent. And Claudia, Claudia has also a wonderful history with us. So, my parents started to grow the company, and as it is, maybe it's an Italian thing, maybe not, but family members join in. My cousin is part of this. I used to live with my aunt while my parents were traveling, and then we started to need to look for more tour leaders. And there was a time in the 90s and 2000s that we were also planning more hiking, non-cycling trips. And so Claudia was one of our first hiking tour leaders that we hired over 20 years ago. So she's known me since I was in high school, long before I ran the company. So Claudia, do you want to give a little update and a little background from your life?
Yeah, I haven't moved around as much as you two probably, but I mean, I was there. I was in the area of Faenza studying at university to become a translator. So I thought, okay, this is great to practice English, and I signed up immediately. And so I started for a few years, and then I moved around Italy first, Milan and Rome, and then I came to Sicily, and then 4 years in Luxembourg. So I've been kind of on off, and I have been always connected to this industry, but also doing translation and lately also mindfulness. I mean, I have kind of different identities and jackets or hats that I put on myself, but yeah, so we've been connected in some way for a long time.
And Claudia does guiding and freelance trip design, and we're glad to have her helping us out with some of these specialties. She's worked with us in many different places, including quite a bit in Tuscany too. And I figured out how to get some faces on, so at least I don't feel like I'm just talking to a screen. So just back to Italy a little bit, enough about us. I'm sure, like so many things in the world right now, there's always the question of, well, how are things there? So I actually, Claudia and Javier can give a better first person account, but just from a bureaucratic or logistical situation, I can tell you where we're at with Italy and travel. It's much like most of Europe, and the borders are still closed. The president of the European Commission did disclose in an interview, but without a timeline, that they are looking to let vaccinated Americans come to Europe. Although, as mentioned before, the different countries will be able to set guidelines for their borders. And what they mean by that is what kinds of, whether you have to have a test, whether you have to quarantine, what that will look like. As we know, there's a lot of uncertainty with travel, but doesn't mean we can't dream and be inspired about what to plan for. And, whether it's this year or another year down the road, there's definitely lots of places to visit. I think what's interesting about the situation now is that if things do open up, I hope there's a process of it opening relatively slowly, but the nice thing about some of the destinations we look at in general that we like to take people is that there are not, they're usually uncrowded even when things are really busy. And so hopefully that will continue to be the case. Although I am sure that there will be pent-up demand and more crowds in some particular hotspots in the world. Does anybody have any particular questions about the current situation? Oh, I see Bob, somebody has their hand up.
Would you like to go back to your PowerPoint screen, Maria Elena?
Are you guys not on my PowerPoint screen anymore?
Now we're looking at your teams.
That's not very nice.
There seems to be a question.
There you go. I thought
Yeah,
you
we
were.
see the PowerPoint now.
Sorry, I was worried somebody had chatted me, but it was my coworker saying she was.
Right.
I see a hand up. Bob, do you want to ask a question?
Yeah, hi Bob, what's your question?
Maybe that wasn't an intentional hand.
Maybe not.
All right, I can keep going. But if there's no questions, I mean, we're happy to, or Javier and Claudia can give you a sense. I think Italy manages it a lot like the US, where certain regions are in different stages with certain restrictions. They're getting out of a current surge, and I know that in Emilia Romagna there's actually a little bit of opening up, maybe, or no? Are you still can't?
Yeah, I mean, we've been in a light lockdown phase for a couple of months. Most of Italy has. And Romagna and Tuscany are now back to a situation of much less restrictions because the contagion level, et cetera, has gone down. Very hopeful, and especially as vaccines start to roll out here as well.
Yeah, Europe as a whole has been a little slower, but it seems like it's definitely picking up in the last month. So there's some optimism there. I think that by the middle of summer, it'll be definitely, I think that hockey stick ramp up that we saw here in the US that really started in February, March will hopefully happen here in May or June for most of Europe as they get more supply. So I think that's going to be a big game changer for the timing for when things will open. All right, let's get going to our destinations then and go see some places to visit. Well, we all know there's lots of must-sees in Tuscany. I only put two of the most iconic here, but there's a lot of other places that are very well known. And one of the nice things when you plan a trip is that you can always land. A lot of these must-sees are great gateway places. You know, you can land in Florence or land in Pisa. Interestingly enough, Pisa has one of the best international airports in central Italy. If not, it's better than Florence's actually when it comes to connections. So it's nice because you can arrive and you can visit Pisa and then you can leave when it's too busy and you can say you've seen it. Same with Florence, although Florence has a lot of hidden places to explore. Florence is actually one of my favorite cities, even though it is quite busy often with tourists because there are so many places to explore. We like to take folks on guided tours that often include, you know, whether it's visiting little workshops and artisans. I don't know if you recently heard about the bookshops of Italy and how the history of the bookshops of Florence was really interesting. It was on the radio recently. And I think there's just a lot of, at least I would say, one full day's worth of good hidden gems to visit in Florence, as well as maybe some of the classic sites like the cathedral and the walking around the old city. But I wasn't going to talk very much about these particular towns, and I was going to go further off the beaten path as we discussed. So we're going to start in the Val d'Orcia, which, if to orient yourself, Florence is up here in this tiny little corner. And just as a reminder, this is more or less central Italy, maybe slightly towards the north. And the Val d'Orcia is south of Siena, south of the Chianti area, really in the middle of this region. And it has an interesting designation in that it is a UNESCO heritage site. And I think there are very few, I'm not going to say how many, but very, very few that have this particular designation. It is an outstanding universal historical value for the intersection of human and natural. So how humans have affected the landscape. And that's because for thousands of years, humans have settled in this area. And the inspirational and beautiful photos that many of you have seen from Tuscany are probably 90% coming from this area, which many people don't realize. They're all in this very small region, which in and of itself is a reason to go visit. If you're a photographer, or just want to sit on a veranda and stare at beautiful sunrises and sunsets, this is a fascinating place to go. But there's also a lot of interesting things to do as well. You can get out into the nice thing about the Val d'Orcia, actually, from an accessibility perspective, as far as public transportation. I mean, I say nice because it does keep the crowds down. It is actually hard to get to. There are no trains that take you much, that take you really into the valley. You usually have to shuttle and get to some of the inner towns by private transfer or rent a car, or bicycle if you want to take a bike tour. That we also help with those. But once you're there, it's got some beautiful, what we call the white roads of Tuscany, and they're great hiking and walking. So there's a lot of nice routes that you can do hiking as much as or as little as you want. And there's some famous Benedictine monasteries to explore. And then actually I'm going to go back, the famous photo of this little chapel and the farmhouse, which is, I'm sure many of you have seen, is actually relatively it's easy to take a picture of from the road, but it's not that much of a hike at all to get to it. You can actually drive within, a quarter mile of it and then just hike in. Or you can take a nicer, longer hike across the valley. The group that Nancy was with, this is them in front of that little chapel. And for how famous it is, it's actually not really that crowded most of the time to when you actually the actual chapel. So it's a nice, you feel like you're in a postcard most of the time when you're walking through the Val d'Orcia. I think that's probably the best way to describe it. Whenever I go, I just, I just sit and wonder at the landscape. It's just so stunning. One of the particular activities that the group that Nancy was with was able to do was a truffle hunt, which is common in other parts of Italy as well. I don't know if Nancy or Claudia, you two want to talk at all about these particular experiences.
It was such a fun experience. And these two guides were worried because it was very beginning of the truffle ripening season, which I had no idea how this works, but they are underground and the dogs are able to smell them once they get ripe or start to rot, I guess. And they weren't sure there would be any ripe yet. So they went and buried a few, like an Easter egg hunt. So we would be able to tell how the dogs react when they found them. But turns out they're like a bonus day of truffle hunting. They found the ones they hid, plus they found a bunch of other ones. The one that a woman in the bottom right is holding, that's Chrissy from South Africa. Well, American who now lives in South Africa. And that was like a golden size for that white truffle. So they were very excited to find that one. Claudia, do you remember the name of that puppy? He was so cute.
No, but it was a wonderful experience because again, they were as excited as we were because they were not expecting to find so many truffles and especially the white truffles. So they were like, oh my God. And they gave us all the black truffles basically in the end. And there was this puppy that they were training and they were really careful because the puppy, when the puppy gets too excited, he's kind of digging too much and he needs to know when to stop so that it doesn't damage the truffle. So it was super interesting. And
it was really fun. And then we had a little bit of truffles on our pasta that night
because they gave us the black truffles that were not that interesting for them apparently, and we had a wonderful tagliatelle with truffle that night at this place. We were staying in a really nice place, which was a winery, a farm. Do you remember the place where this lady, the owner, was born, and she created this whole range of wineries scattered around Tuscany?
Yeah.
Yeah, I have some photos of it. This was in Podere Salicotto, or?
No,
Right.
no, it's Fattoria al Colle.
Oh, okay, you guys were at college. Okay.
So yeah, it was very
That's
fun.
fun. I think I have a photo of your truffle pasta actually in the next in a few slides down.
Too bad we can't smell it or taste it right
No,
now.
you can't smell it. Like any place in Italy, there's of course going to be lots of options for cooking classes. But I mean, as you think about what kinds of classes you want, it's also good to remember you can do specific things. So you can do pasta. And it was fun for this particular group. You guys did bread. I think you did couple of bread and focaccia, and Tuscany is very well known for its focaccia as well. And so that's always a highlight, I think, if you're interested in any sort of cooking and cuisine, and a reminder as you're thinking about what kinds of cooking class you don't have to do, the 3-course meal. You could just really concentrate on one type of cooking class, and there's usually the right person to execute on that one.
Yeah, that was a fun day.
Yeah, did you guys do you guys did 2 classes, because you did the bread and something else too, right? Because I have photos of 2 different types of cooking.
I think it was
Or was
at the
that-
same place though.
Okay.
I think it was
Yeah.
all at the same place.
So one of the other interesting pieces that I think sometimes we forget, especially in this country, is all of the artisanal workshops that are still working and effectively in business. And so anything from specialty farms, I mean, there's one saffron farmer that we know of that has a great visit. There's a lentil farmer that also is and specialty grains of the area, like ancient grains. And then of course there's also the other artisanal cheese and of course wineries, as many wineries as you can think of and want to visit. But in addition, there's also this one, the leather making factory that I think the group went to. And there's also an iron making place that you can go to. So there's just so many options to explore the crafts that, many are modernized now, but they still are an experience to go see and to learn about the history and things like that. I even found a good photo of Nancy working on her belter. I don't know what you were working on.
We were making bracelets, and that was the impression of the stamp of the family name on the. I think that's what I'm doing right there.
Yeah. You didn't put the picture when the ladies went to the shop later with all the bags.
Oh, yeah, with Joe.
That was
Totally,
funny.
with like 12 bags.
Yeah, like holding all the bags.
I think she bought 3 of them.
I don't know if I had that photo somewhere.
Let's see if I can find
Today,
it.
when I was going through the pictures, it was like,
Oh, there's our truffle pasta.
Yeah.
Yum.
Yes, there's the truffle pasta.
mhm.
That's a great. And like I said, even in the cooking, there's cooking classes where you can actually get in, and a lot of the cooking classes may include also shopping at the local market if you want. But there's also just the enjoyment of the wine and the food. Let's not forget about that part of exploring Italy. And there's just some exquisite restaurants, but it's also nice that at your bed and breakfast or at your local agriturismo, there's often, the home cooked meal that's just as good. Some of the lodging, let me see here.
This was at Podere Salicotto, the pictures with the wine tasting.
Yeah, this winery. Yeah, I think both of those were at Podere Salicotto. So this is I actually have a couple of photos of the Podere. So this photo up here and then this photo down here, diagonal from each other, are a particular villa that we really like. That's kind of on the north side of the Val d'Orcia, not too far from the Benedictine monastery of Monte Oliveto Maggiore, which is one of the most famous Benedictine monasteries in Italy. But they have 8 or 9 rooms, I think, maybe even to 7. And it's a beautiful hilltop villa that has wonderful little suites, and they're mostly a bed and breakfast. They don't really have a restaurant, but they'll do cooking classes, and they have their own wine cellar. And they're just a delightful couple. And then there's also options to stay in actual wine hotels. There's not very many, but this particular one that I have pictured here in the lower left is called Palazzo Vecchio. It's actually closer to the Montepulciano area. So it's not really in the Val d'Orcia, it's right on the edge, I would say. It's really a stunning small batch, basically a small artisanal winery that makes some great Montepulciano. And I don't have any photos, but you know, there are small towns and they are bustling and lively, and there's always boutique hotels, and we have great options for also staying in town, because sometimes it's really nice to stay in town to be able to walk out into the piazza and have an ice cream and have a beer and sit out and see town life. So the nice thing about a lot of this region, really any region in Italy, but this particular region, you have the picturesque walled medieval cities that have a lot of life and some really nice hotels in them. But because we were talking about the Val d'Orcia, which is more rural, I put photos of the great villas that we love here. Do you have anything else to add, Claudia, of the Val d'Orcia, or Nancy?
Well, the owners are just wonderful, this particular property. And I didn't know that they didn't really have a kitchen or serve dinner, because they brought so many, what do you call it, antipasto down when we had our wine tasting down in their wine cellar that night. We didn't go away hungry. It was really wonderful. And then the following year, Claudia was the guide for a small group of friends of mine that went back there. I think we filled the place, right, Claudia?
Completely, yeah.
Yeah. Did you have to sleep on a couch or something? I can't remember. In the owner's suite. But the people that went on that small group, they were mostly friends of mine from the Loon Mountain, from the New England Disabled Sports Program that I volunteer with, and they had a wonderful time. And that was a highlight, was meeting Sylvia and Paulo, right? Is his name? Her husband, I think.
Paolo and Silvia.
Yeah. So really special place. And I think it was the wine, Brunello.
Yeah, the one that we had that night was Brunello, because it's very close to Montalcino, which is really the most famous place probably in Italy for its wine, Brunello. Yeah.
So we could stay there all day.
You could stay there all week.
Yeah, right. I know. We could talk the rest of the hour about this.
Yeah. But I'm going to move on. I'm going to move on to one more area, and I kind of cheated actually. And when I selected the next spot to talk about within Tuscany, that's off the beaten path, I really, I wanted to squeeze two in, so I'm going to call them one, but they're really kind of two. So they're the Etruscan coast, which kind of comprises a lot of the coastline, as the name suggests, and the Maremma region, which is, the Maremma region is the part that's in green right here. And you can't really see this little, for some reason, this map got cut off, but it's the lower part of Tuscany, the lower southwestern side of Tuscany, basically along the coast. And the Etruscan coast does reach a little further north here. But it's an area that is really not well known. Even Italians don't go there very much. Even Claudia was like, I've never really been there. And it's described in an interesting way. It's described as kind of a down to earth part of the Tuscan coast, because there's some parts of the Tuscan coast that you can imagine are very posh and very high end. And this is definitely not considered that. But then, like so many regions within Italy, I mean, this is one of the beauties of Italy, is that there's just diversity within 100 miles, because you've got a coastline, you've got valleys, agricultural valleys, and then you have the mountains on so many different levels. So the Maremma definitely comprises a lot of that, a great mix. And so you can get a lot of these pieces and these experiences in this particular region, which is it's just not very touristy at all. The biggest town is Grosseto. That's the central town that you would train into from somewhere else. And then from there, you can take some regional trains or transfers to other places to kind of spend some time.
Is that little island down there, or is it connected with the bridge?
Yeah, so this is the Isola d'Elba and Giglio are down there. So the islands, some of the more famous Tuscan islands are the 2 islands off of Maremma. And they have beautiful limestone and diving options and kind of ocean type water activities, kayaking and things like that. I don't know much about them, although we've got partners who do great trips and activities down there, but it feels like you're in, it's true. It's like almost you're in the Southern Mediterranean, almost maybe in Tuscany or in Sicily for some parts of it when you're on the islands there.
Nice.
Well, I really love that area because it's like a perfect blend of what you just described, Mediterranean, Sardinia type, atmosphere, but the culture, the colors, the sights, the sounds, and right near the coast, the typical Tuscan hills with these incredible little towns are right in front of you, and I haven't experienced that anywhere else in Italy.
Yeah,
And
it has a lot in a small space. It has a lot of that diversity in a small space. And I think the added benefit that it doesn't have any big names to it. And so it really just has kind of normal people in it. It doesn't have any major tourist attractions, but it has some fascinating historical places. So one of the specific things that I think is fascinating is the Etruscan history that you find around here. The Etruscans are considered the first Romans, the pre-Roman people of Italy. And then people say they just kind of disappeared, and that's hard to imagine. They probably didn't just disappear. They probably evolved into the Roman culture that then existed. But archaeologists haven't actually been able to find that clear of a path, which is why they don't say that they are concertedly became the Romans. But so there's a little mystery there. But there's a lot of archaeological evidence in this area between the tombs and most interestingly, in the ancient Tufa towns, what are considered the Tufa towns, there are some beautiful, what are called the Via Cave, which are like caves. And they're these roads that were probably at some point walkways for, like they were basically highways for them. And they're cut into this volcanic rock. And you can kind of see this as a cave all the way down to 30 meters. And there's kilometers of these roads amongst some of these towns. And so they're really fascinating and interesting to think that you're walking through these roads that were cut into this rock, a couple thousand years ago, probably. So it's just a really interesting historical. I think if you're an ancient history buff, this would be a really interesting place to travel to. And plus then on top of that, and this is the beauty of Italy, an area that has been developed and lived in for so many years, you have all the layers of the more modern Italians, the medieval, and then the medieval walled cities, and then the Renaissance cities with the beautiful palaces. It's just such a fabulous layering of history that this particular area, I think, has one that is just special because of that Etruscan feel. So that's one of the highlights, I'd say, of this area. And then, of course, we're still in Italy, so you can't get away from the food experiences. You've still got great cheese. And even though you can find incredible pecorino in the Val d'Orcia also, actually Pienza is known for its pecorino. We have this relatively, small manufacturer that we enjoy visiting. And it's so fun to be able to go walk through the factory. The fact that it doesn't have a lot of tourists, they still let, a group of us come in, they suit us up in full gear, full PPE. Now we know all these common words. We're in masks and headgear and slippers. And they even had us put, the robes on to make sure if we walked through, we didn't shed anything. And we learned about how they make pecorino and ricotta and things like that. And then, of course, you always get to taste it. There's some great specialty wines. One of my favorite things about traveling to new places is realizing there's so many fabulous wines that you've never heard of that are just good, whether they're specifically good because you're drinking them in that particular context or not, I don't know. But the Savannah white wine from this area is very well known. And the photo of this guy serving us, I think probably it looks like tagliatelle, is one of my favorite examples of just the fact that anywhere you go in Italy, there's really good food. I mean, this was a restaurant that didn't have, their main seating was a tent out in the piazza in front of them. It's a plastic tent with plastic tables and chairs. And, there was a group of us, and we were cycling this particular day. And we were hungry, so he appropriately brought out a very large, bowl of pasta to serve us. But it's, this could be your uncle serving you pasta, and it's just such fabulous food. I think we ate so much that day, none of us wanted to get back on the bike. And I think that's something that you find a lot in these places that don't have a lot of tourist activity. Just any trattoria has fabulous food.
Or even great fish along the coast.
Yes, and great fish. This
noodles.
is some of the best seafood in Italy, I would say. I mean, it's very well known. And the coastal towns are a mix of touristy kind of beach resorty, but there's also some kind of rugged areas as well. And then there's also hot springs and spas. That's particularly one interesting part of this. Just in the northern part, there's a couple of hot springs and spa areas. Those are throughout Italy, but the ones in this area just seem to be a little bit calmer and quainter. And no offense to some of the ones in other parts of Italy, but these have been more modernized. Italy has a strong history with hot springs and spas, but a lot of it was built in the 60s and 70s, and they haven't been modernized much. But these have some really nice hotels. And this particular photo with the pool, that's actually a hot pool in a hotel. That's absolutely stunning. And then
some of these were built by Romans.
Yeah,
which-
yes, a lot of these are Roman
Yeah.
baths that were originally filtered. Yeah, exactly. Or who knows, maybe the Etruscans before them.
And you say that some of I know when we were in Montecatini, Terma for the summit,
Yeah.
there were different taps of water that had different medicinal purposes. Do some of these pools also have all that medicinal?
I'm sure depending on the hotel that you go to, yeah, that they have probably created circuits and things like that, depending on the qualities of the water. I don't remember if there's any particular. Montecatini was pretty special in the sense that they had all of those different ones. That's one of the reasons why it was so famous in Italy, because of the qualities of the water. I don't remember if these particular ones have those same differences, like all of the variety. But that's always been one of the claims to the importance of going to hot springs and to spas is not necessarily just a beauty thing for Italians. It's actually rooted in this idea that different waters have different qualities in healing capacity, depending on how you bathe in it or use it. Yeah. Drinking it sometimes.
Well, up to not so long ago, the national healthcare system in Italy still covered therapeutic use of thermal baths, right? And when they stopped doing so, it was a big problem for a lot of these thermal springs. But yeah, there is a big belief in them as therapeutic in many ways.
One of the more random things that I think is fun to visit in this particular area, and it's actually in the southern tip, is called the Taro Gardens. And it's kind of like this Gaudi style garden that popped up from a particular artist. And he was an eccentric artist, and he created this. It very much feels like you're in Barcelona looking at a bunch of Gaudi's sculptures, but he has this garden in the middle of the Maremma south towards the Capalbio area, which is really fun to visit. And so it's just kind of a nice whimsical experience to go walk through it one day, and kind of reminds you to not take yourself seriously. It seems like when you're amongst all of this historical area, it's kind of a nice little diversion. And then just to reiterate, much like a lot of Italy, there's a lot of different types of lodging. The nice thing about these beautiful little medieval towns is a lot of the hotels are these small boutique hotels, and the walls are nestled in the kind of main areas, or there's also beautiful country resorts. It's kind of a nice specialty of this particular region. They know that if you're going to come, you might come for 3 or 4 or 5 days. And so they make it pretty appealing to just hang out and sit by the pool if you want.
I want to sit in that first and second picture with a glass of wine or two.
Yeah. That first
one.
one's nice. The cozy
Yeah.
lights and that red tufa, the stone. That's the tufa towns. All have that red stone, and they're just so beautiful.
Very nice.
So that's all I have to say about those two regions in Tuscany. I don't know if anyone has any specific questions or if we want to go on to Sicily and hear a little bit about the Sicily pieces, and then we can go back to Q&A for everything. Should we do that, Nancy? Okay. Okay, Claudia, I see you. So I'll try and move the slides forward when I intuit that you want me to do that. How does that sound?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Okay, so just to give you once again a map of Sicily, I guess you know that we're really, really, really south. Actually, you can't see it, but on the west side, you would have Tunis, the capital of Tunisia, which is actually more north of some places in Sicily. So just to give you an idea, we're almost in Africa. And I put this sentence because this is something that one of my favorite winery owner says when he welcomes our small groups. It's like Sicily. It's not an island. You think of an island as somewhere completely remote, but it's not in the sense that it's been visited by virtually all civilizations in the Mediterranean Sea. And it's also so diverse, probably because of that. It's been exposed to all kinds of cultures and influences. And you can still see that a lot. So traveling from one side to the other, you think you're really moving across countries or maybe a continent. And it's also really difficult to travel around. So I say this because many people think that, oh, I want to come to Sicily. I have 5 days and I want to visit Sicily. And I'm like, you can probably visit like 1/20th of Sicily decently in 5 days. It's not easy to get around. It's so dense of places to see and experiences to have. So really, it's a place where you can come back and again and again and again. And I have a lady that has been already twice to Sicily with me that I take around, and every other year she comes back because she wants to see another piece. And I'm sure we can go on like this for at least 10 more times if you take really your time. So it's, as I said, it's very diverse because it's been basically conquered by all different civilizations. So there were the ancient Sicilians that were kind of attacked, conquered first by the Greeks. So that's the first kind of well-known people that came in the area of northeast. So Taormina was the first place to be conquered. And then the Romans arrived and used it as their resort place from Rome, because it was really cool to have these beautiful villas. There are lots of villas with mosaics, and they love the wine, the local wine and food. And then the Arabs arrived. So we have a lot of Arabic influence, especially on the West Coast, much more than, so the Greek coast is rather more like Greek influenced where I live, and the West Coast is much more Arabic. And Trapani, which is found really on the west side, looks like Tunis, for example. So really a totally different feel than where I'm based. And then again, I mean, after that, it was the Normans and then the French and the Spanish. I mean, so it's very interesting because you see the layers of these civilizations wherever you go. For example, here where I live, the Duomo, the cathedral, it was actually a Greek temple, which was turned into a church at some point. You can still see the columns. I mean, so everything has been reused over time, depending on whoever has come. And of course, this has had consequences in terms also of food, for example. So there's a great variety of food, great ingredients here. So whatever you cook basically cannot be that bad. But the food is very diverse because by the sea, of course, you think, oh, it's an island, you have seafood. Yes and no, because here on the sea we have seafood, and like half an hour inland you have sausages and lots of they love to raise pigs. They have this very special also breeds, like there's a very famous really tiny black pig from the Nebrodi Mountains. So all these very, very specific local foods that are really nice to discover. So maybe you want to move to the next one. next slides, just to, I don't know if you've heard much about Sicily. You've probably heard about Taormina, which is the second picture you can see. Here you see it from above. You see the castle on the left, and then Taormina down there. I put this picture because Taormina, usually you see the picture of the Greek theater. There's a Roman Greek theater, really famous, beautiful. I mean, Taormina is an amazing place with beautiful, beautiful scenery. But if you walk on the main road, it's like you need to stop and you almost need a traffic lights. There are so many people. It's very, very, very busy. At the same time, it's a place you want to see because it is beautiful. But I just want to show you that as soon as you turn like somewhere else, as is often the case, then you don't find anybody. And there is one of probably the most beautiful walks, hikes, but not so difficult that I've ever done, that connects Taormina to the next hill. And it's, I've never met anybody, maybe once or twice a German or two, just I don't know why. The Germans always know where to go, but no Italians for sure ever walks on this way. So again, we do know that it's important to see the highlights, but we also find ways to avoid spending too much time in the crowded place. Another example is the Valley of the Temples in Agrigento. Again, it's such a unique experience. So many temples, so well preserved. There's nothing like that in Greece. So if you want to see Greek monuments, and I hope there are no Greeks around here, but you really have to come to Sicily because they're much better preserved. Not everybody knows that inside there are some beautiful gardens that have been kept with special species. So we stop also at these specific places. Then the last picture down there, the golden thing, is a mosaic, and it's inside the most famous building in Palermo. So Palermo is, of course, the main city in Sicily. It's busy, but it's also very interesting. It's the most dynamic city in Sicily nowadays. It was the European Capital of Culture in 2018, and it's been really renovated, and it's there's a lot going on there. That's the place to go for like more experimental stuff, and very, very interesting. So and there's still a lot of really authentic life as well, lots of street markets. So it's definitely a place that can be very interesting if you know where to go. And then the final one, the one on the top right corner, is the historical center of Ortigia of Syracuse. And the historical center is on an island that is very close to the main island, connected by 2 bridges, and this is where I live. And I think in the next slide, no, we're moving to Mount Etna. I had to spend some time talking about Mount Etna, and if you want to start the video, I can talk while the video goes on because it's probably a bit long otherwise. This video for the Sicilian is the mountain. You don't have to say which mountain. It's so important for them. And it is because it's huge. Like we do have a lot of mountains here, but this is way bigger and higher than anything else. Really, there's a very, very wide base, and you see it immediately as you arrive, even at the airport. This video was filmed by a guy that I met as a guide, as a volcanologist, and now he's working as a photographer for the National Geographic. So whenever I can, I try to hire him to take us around, and he's super excited about every single piece of rock he finds around. And it's interesting because many people think, in order to really appreciate Mount Etna, because it's so high and so big, you need to be a tough hiker, but actually you can have a wonderful experience, and it's very interesting from a geological point of view. It's very interesting to go through the different lava flows, the different kinds of vegetation you find. it's a very fertile area, so it's full of interesting crops. Like now they grow exotic fruits like avocados, huge production, and they're really something that everybody loves here. And the wine as well, of course, especially in the last few years, it's very interesting because you have similar grapes to other places in Sicily, but a totally different result because the soil is completely different. It's a really unique terroir, the French would say. It's a very special area. So it's interesting because it's very active, and I don't know if you've heard it, but I guess so, because I had American friends that sent me emails like, "Oh, how are you? Because we saw on the news that Etna is really active." And it was really active maybe a month or 6 weeks ago. I could see it even from here. I live 100 kilometers away. We got the ash here as far as with the wind. Like the car is completely covered with ash. But something that Giuseppe always says is that this is a free show. It's beautiful, but it's not dangerous. It's not like Pompeii. You cannot be surprised by like the lava flow just covering you. Very slow. So of course, move to the next one. So it has, of course, over the centuries destroyed many towns, but killed very few people because you have all the time to, just get your stuff and go somewhere else. But these are pictures that on the bottom taken last month. So this on the left was taken from just the foot of Mount Etna near the winery of the guy I was telling you about. And the one on the right was taken from Catania, which is the big city, again, at the foot of Mount Etna, where you would fly to come to the East Coast. So this view was really amazing. I mean, it's something that doesn't happen that often, but it was quite beautiful. And then on the top, you have a couple of pictures taken from trails. So you go through very different types of areas, and you also visit something that is called lava tubes. So when there's a special situation where the lava is so fast that it creates these kinds of bubbles, and the steam keeps them empty, void, basically, and then they solidify very quickly. And you have these kinds of caves that you can visit with helmets and torches. So, but they're very, very accessible. It's not like, you can decide if you want to walk for 6 hours or just park your car and walk 10 minutes to see them. So it's a very flexible experience. This is the place where I live, Ortigia, that small island that I showed you before. Again, you can start the video while I talk about it probably. So this is where I decided to live after I told you before, I grew up. I'm from a place, Padua, near Venice. Then I studied in the region where Experience Plus is based. I moved around Italy, and I came to Sicily when I was living in Rome for 1 month, and I was like, okay, this is the place where I want to live, and not Sicily in general, but Ortigia, this specific island. And I came here exactly 14 years ago on the 25th of April, so I still remember. And so ever since I've developed tours mainly on the East Coast, and this is also the area that we had discussed mainly when we talked about last year creating. There are many other areas, a lot of islands, the Orlean Islands, the Agadi Islands, the coast is the most, the richest in terms of history. It has a lot of Greek history, but also all the Baroque towns. We'll see a few pictures later. Beautiful, also nature, variety of food, so it's relatively easy to move around. But just from north to south, I would say you would need at least a week, if not 10 days, to really see it properly. market in Ortigia, here on the island. This island is tiny. Huh? The perimeter is 3 kilometers, so it's what, like less than 2 miles. Very small island, but it's very, very rich. Only on this island there are ruins of 7 temples, one of which has become a cathedral. And there's still a lot of course, it's been discovered lately. So if you come in August, it's not very pleasant. But the good thing is that we usually explore these places at different times. It's just find really.
Is it hot in August? Is that why it's not as pleasant, or?
No, it's very busy. It's very busy. Because Italians, Italians also they all take their holidays in August, and very close to here there are beautiful beaches. I mean, people that just would July and August. It's also very hot anyway, so it's not the best time to do your sightseeing. You just want to be on the beach and just jump into the sea every 10 minutes. Beautiful also to have a boat ride around the island and also in the area inside the caves, and then you can stop and have swims, sailboats, also you have around. Just a little bit the feeling. This is a Greek, well, Ortiga is of course a Greek name for the Greek spelling, and this video was filmed by like a partner of a friend of mine, a dear friend of mine. I just wanted to put something a bit meaningful of people that I actually know. And then, okay, well, just a few places that we have on the East Coast to give you a little bit of the variety. So I haven't really focused on towns that much, but that's Modica. The first one that you see is the Baroque style. In 1693, there was a huge earthquake here that destroyed most of the towns on the East Coast, except for Ortigia probably, which is on this island, which is rocky, and it wasn't very badly damaged. But most of the other towns, Noto, Modica, and Ragusa, were completely destroyed. And so they were completely rebuilt. And the unusual thing is that they were rebuilt in a very homogeneous style for once, because they were rebuilt at the same time. The most famous is probably Noto, which is called the jewel of Baroque, but also Modica, and Modica with its chocolate, very famous from Mexican origins. And Ragusa, famous for Montalbano. I don't know if in the US, but I guess you can see the series of this kind of detective Montalbano from Sicily. This series was mainly filmed in this area. So, and it's also UNESCO World Heritage Site. We have many actually. The second picture is taken from a very small river, which is beautiful. There are trails to walk or to bike if you want, where papyrus grows. And so there's also this tradition of paper making, basically. And you can find places around Ortigia where they show you how to do it, and you have all these little paintings on this special paper. The third one is one of the most beautiful. I mean, I cannot really express the spirit of the place because you should be there. Pantalica, it's a necropolis. So it dates back to before the Greeks came, to the old Sicilians, and it was like their cemetery basically. But there are something like 11,000 holes like those on the faces of the mountains. There are like a few canyons, a couple of rivers. You can also do water trekking, going upstream on these rivers in the summer. And there's just such a special atmosphere of having nature, such a beautiful nature with these very, very ancient ruins that are totally accessible. I mean, it's not like you have to pay a ticket to get in. It's completely there. It's part of the scenery in a way. And another very special place is the one on the right, which is Noto Antica. So as I told you, there was this huge earthquake in 1693. The ancient Noto was completely destroyed and abandoned, and they rebuilt the new one 10 kilometers away. But you can still go and visit the ancient part. And this is one of those small pools that you can find. You can find also old Arab tanneries, all these ruins that, if you've been to Morocco, for example, are also very common, but they're completely accessible. Once again, you go there, you see them, you just with your torch, all these really carved in the rock. Here, we like to stop and have a swim, of course, in this little kind of pool. And the last picture down there is the nature reserve of Vendicali, beautiful reserve by the sea, with also these ponds and a lot of birds, lots of flamingos, lots of other birds. Like there are periods when wherever you look, you're surrounded by birds. So if you're a bird lover, it's really a paradise. Okay. Next, some, of course, food. I mean, it's inevitable. The first and most of the time we find food along the way. So maybe we're doing a hike or a walk and we stop on the left. That's the picture taken in an incredible place. This family that lives in the middle of nowhere in the countryside, and they make the ricotta when we get there. And then they make the other kinds of cheeses, and we have this warm ricotta on the spot, while at the same time they have all these black pigs I was telling you about just running around. I had picked another picture before where I was trying to hold one of these black pigs that was shrieking like crazy. But a very special experience. I mean, I always ask at the end of the trip, what was maybe, the biggest memory? And we go to sometimes Michelin-starred restaurants that have wonderful food, but most people will tell me, well, we stopped at those farmers that you could hardly understand, because me, as somebody from the north, I can hardly understand people that have been living remotely like this. And so we're really part of the family. They end up sitting with us or the children, and it's very special. Then the picture at the center is something that cannot be explained until you taste it, and it's called granita. It translates into something like crashed ice, I don't know, but it's a very creamy,
Like a slushy.
yeah, but creamy. It's not ice, because I
But it's so much better than the slushy you get anywhere else. It's
made out of real fruit. It's fruit and sugar, basically, or almond or pistachios, because those are the other local specialties. So they're very milky, very creamy, wonderful. So we usually have, not every day, but I mean, as ever on special days, that for breakfast in the summer with a brioche that you see next to it that you taste with it. And this is one of the most famous granita places in Taormina, that even served the G7 when it was held there. It was very famous. Then here you have.
Can I add, Claudia, really quickly?
Yeah.
You mentioned that you're from the north, talking about the traditions of the south. And maybe we should point out that Sicilians and Southerners in Italy are known for being very hospitable, very generous, much more so than Northerners, right? As an example of that, where I live in Faenza, our best friends here happen to be from Sicily. And my friend's mom has basically become a grandmother of our kids here. And that's really the case. That's something that you feel when you're in the South. I just wanted to throw that in. Sorry.
Yeah, and they're so proud of their, like, I don't know, I didn't grow up that way, about my birthplace. And they're like, yeah, when they see that you like the food or you like something, they really give you more, and they want to, so they're very, very proud, and they like to share, and they're so like, wow, yes, I don't know, there's something really special. So the next one is about a cooking class that is very nice because you go to the market. And by the way, that guy that is playing the guitar in there in the background, that's not a touristy thing. This guy plays in a small group here that actually has become quite famous. And he's playing with one of the two singers of, I don't know, I don't know them very well, but they're very famous, Kings of Convenience. So one of them is now based in Syracuse and has created another group with some local guys, and they go around and play. So he actually practices inside the shop there at the market, even off season. So it wasn't playing like the typical, local thing for tourists at all. And so, of course, at the market, you stop here and there, you have a taste of this, you have some prosecco, some local wine, and then you cook your own food. So these are a bit the three stages, and this was with a couple that has also come back twice. And then just one of the million wineries. This is in the area of Noto. Again, because Sicilian wine wasn't really appreciated until maybe 10, 15 years ago, it's something new, and it's still very, there are lots of family-run wineries. They're very passionate about it. It's every place is different, and it's worth visiting. And we spend hours, and you think, oh my God, I'm here with the people, and they give us so much time and so much passion, and it's an experience that goes well beyond the tasting, which is also really good. So yeah, it's a pleasure to pick these places. And then some more non-wine and food experiences. So here you have, well, of course, along the way, again, lots of hikes with beautiful scenery. Like, look at the last picture. That's the top, like the highest hill mountain on top of Taormina, so the most famous place in Sicily. So if you keep walking and walking, you end up there, and you, on clear days, you can see the whole East Coast, basically. Then along the way, you might find a goat farm like this in the middle. That was really cool, with maybe 200, like a nursery of 200 baby goats. On the left there, you have puppets. There's a very long tradition of puppet making, and also puppet shows in Sicily. And so there is still a theater in normal times that has shows every day about these knights that fight this Orlando Furioso. It's this very famous medieval kind of epic story in Italy that we all have to study at school. And it's all about knights and fighting for some lady or something. But it's quite cool, and it's not at all for children, because there are like heads flying all over the place, and it's really nice. And they make the puppets themselves. So there's also the museum and the workshop where they make them. And then artisans, I mean, of course, wherever in Italy. So just like in Tuscany here too, so pottery, ceramic, and basket making, and there's an infinite number of possibilities depending on your tastes. And these are just a few examples of the typical hotels we pick. So a couple of city examples, and others that are more in the countryside. So in Noto, Syracuse, some that tend to reuse like old furniture, typical furniture from Sicily, like this one on the top right in Syracuse.
Yeah, I added a mix of the resorts, and one of the neat things about the lodging, especially in southern Italy, and I'm sure in Sicily, is the ancient masseria. You want to explain a little bit about the masseria and how there's the tradition of those converted farmhouses?
Mm-hmm.
And most of those would have been olive mills. Would they have been olive mills?
Yeah, mainly, or the country home of these noble families, where they would spend some time and they would check on their land, because it used to be really a feudal system here. So with these landlords that owned a lot of land. So there are many of them, and they've been like slowly renovated and turned into either agriturismo or hotels, or yeah, and many of them are really beautiful. Mm-hmm.
Have we mentioned what an agriturismo is? I can't remember, sorry.
No, I meant to do that at the beginning. Thank you, Javier. And I sometimes assume people know, but that's probably better to explain it. It's starting to be a more common way of living here too, or of lodging. But the agriturismo is, well, legally in Italy, you have to be a working producer of some sort. You know, you have to be producing some sort of agricultural products, but then you also have a lodging component. You don't necessarily have to have a restaurant, I don't believe, but you have to be producing wine, olive oil, other foods, whether it's, you know, even prosciutto and things like that, or jam, or who knows what. And I'm sure there's some bureaucratic threshold of how much you have to produce for you to still be considered an agriturismo. But that's become a very common style of lodging. And that is a little different than something called a masseria. A masseria might be just a renovated old villa that has become a country resort or something like that. But in Sicily and in other parts of southern Italy, you'll see masseria as part of the hotel name. And often that means it's a historic estate of some sort. While an agriturismo actually has an agricultural current production on its property. So those are the big differences.
Well, I can tell you as a foreigner here that staying in either an agriturismo or a masseria is a wonderful experience throughout the country.
Yeah, yeah.
Is that similar to in Portugal or Spain, the posadas or?
The posadas are a little bit more historic, like
Parador is the other one, I think.
yeah, the paradores and the posadas are more historic government buildings that were actually often built as lodging for yeah, it was kind of the elite employees in the you know, the taking old historic castles. So they're a little more grand, even, I would say. The masseria and the masseria especially are going to be, you know, they're still grand, but they probably only have, you know, 10 rooms or something like that. They're smaller scale, so they're even more intimate, and sometimes more or less deluxe, depending on kind of which direction you go. They can go all of the spectrum. But I would say that the paradores and the posadas, and even now in Spain and Portugal, they're still government run. They're a federal chain, basically. And they often have, you know, they're old monasteries, because those are the ones where maybe the church donated it as a hotel or something like that. So it's the same concept as far as historic buildings goes, but it's much more at the kind of more familial level, I would say.
Oh yeah, I was looking for some final quotes about Sicily by famous people, because as I told you, it was a famous destination, not only at Roman times, but also more recently, like during, you know, the grand tour that intellectuals would take. And so there's something by D.H. Lawrence who said, anyone who has once knows this land can never be quite free from the nostalgia from it. And then going to Sicily, so that's in Taormina. This is a street actually here in Ortigia on my island. Going to Sicily is better than going to the moon, Gabriel Garcia Marquez. And then Sicilians build Plato things like they will live forever and eat like they will die tomorrow. This is
That's a good one.
Still true after 2000 years later.
That's a good one. Some things don't change.
Mm-mm.
All right. Oh, apparently my animation is stuck. That's the end of our presentation. As usual, it's always longer when you actually say it out loud. So I hope we didn't go too long.
Oh, you held the attention of almost
I hope
everyone.
so. You can never
that
tell
was
behind
good.
the screen, but
Yeah.
you guys have any questions? Whether it's about this or anything else?
I have so many, I don't know where to start. But mainly, I'm excited about the places that I didn't know about, and also that I didn't know that Javier was Argentinian. I didn't know that, and that's high on my list. And a few of the other people here on this call are planning Patagonia adventures, so that's exciting as well. So maybe another presentation we can go down to South America. But does anyone else on the call have any questions? Anne? Oh, there you are, Anne.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, about the biking. Are these tours? I mean, I'd love to go, but I'm just wondering how these tours work.
Bike tours, yeah, our bike tours, we have trips throughout Italy. They're anywhere from 7 to 12 days long. They're generally guided. They're a guided tour, and so with a set departure and a set date. And we have different levels of the trips, anywhere from 1 to 5.
Okay.
Right.
Kathy sent me a message.
Yeah,
Do
that's
you
me.
want to- Yeah. You
So
want to-
my friend Ann Patch and I are interested in Sicily, and so we like to walk, but we both have arthritis, and so how do you travel around Italy? I mean Sicily. If you're doing a walking tour, can you have a
Kathy,
car to
it
go?
so at least you're more comfortable.
Say if you had like 2 people, could we hire a guide and
Yeah, of course, yeah. So it
Okay.
would be smaller. You don't
Yeah.
get the bus, but yeah.
yeah, that's okay. Okay, thank
Well,
you.
we have put together packages and itineraries for couples,
Mhm.
small groups of friends, 2 or 3.
Yeah, we're 2 friends, so.
Mhm.
And Javier, I have to ask you, do you dance Argentine tango?
Actually, Claudia does.
Oh, but I do.
And she's been to Argentina.
I even went to Argentina to dance.
Okay, yes.
Do you dance, Kathy?
Yes.
Do you dance?
Yes.
Yes.
And my friend Ann Patch down there.
Wow. For me in the last year because I
Exactly.
miss tango so much.
We have a teacher from Buenos Aires that we're in Portland, Maine.
Well,
Sad.
I just want to thank everyone, and a few people that have left the meeting have texted me that they just wanted to say thank you again to all of you guys for doing this from different time zones, and even the guests coming from different parts of this country. From, I don't think Jean is still on, but she's in Minnesota, and my sister and her husband are here from Ohio. So we kind of branch out, and you never know how many people are going to tune in, but I think it was very well received. So thank you again. We really appreciate it.